We're here in Pune with a very distinguished guest, best known as India's Quizmaster. Mr. Barry O'Brien is the President-in-Chief of the All India Anglo-Indian Association. Several hundred delegates from the Anglo-Indian community converged on Bishop School, Pune for the All India Anglo-Indian Association AGM. The last 3 days have been filled with business sessions, presenting reports, revising policies, and updating the members on the achievements over the last year. The 3-day event was punctuated with events, games, music, dancing, and just plain fun. Welcome, Mr. Barry O'Brien, President-in-Chief of the All India Anglo-Indian Association. I, Michelle Phillip, am happy to be here as your host, and I'm indeed grateful that you agreed to be on this interview.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure.
Yes. So, Barry, what would you say has been the highlight of this AGM?
I think the AGM is, of course, basically for business meetings where we discuss policy, and that's why we come together. But for me, I think it's become a celebration of life, a celebration of people's lives and their achievements, people getting to know about, oh, I didn't know there was such a person, or I didn't know there were so many young people doing this. So I think it creates a greater awareness within the community, obviously a greater sense of pride, and people go back with their batteries charged because they're working at the grassroots level, and they come here, they relax, they hear what others are doing, and I think that's the main focus, to go back with your batteries charged to work even more, more in a more, let's say, planned way.
So, speaking to several of the delegates, the one thing that stood out was your role in inspiring and motivating the youth of the community. So, what would you say has been your driving force for this particular angle?
Well, I'd just like to say that, I'm going to accept that really humbly, because if you talk about my predecessors, then if you ask what was the greatest achievement of Sir Henry Gidney, you have to say that he was leading the community when the community was still singing God Save the King. And he had to, very deftly balance between, as I've written in my book, between, it's like the Indian rope trick between the British, the colonizers and the colonized. It was his great challenge. Frank Anthony, independence came, his great challenge was, which side are we on? Where do we live? That was his. General Williams, I think, concentrated a lot on social work, reaching out to the people. And Mr. Neil O'Brien, of course, education was his center point. For me, I think more than at any time in this association, the youth are being the focus now, and I'll humbly take the credit. Yes, so, and what is it? Unless you look ahead, and you can't look ahead with people like me and people older than me. So that's the whole idea. We've got to build leadership. We've got to get people coming in young and, saying, whoa, AGM is a really good place for fun. And they come in for fun, but they end up getting really involved in the association.
And do you think that the outcome of this was to bring in a sense of involvement in the activities of the community, in the contribution of the community?
Absolutely. But mostly it's for tomorrow. Because you can't tell them tomorrow that you're on tomorrow. Yeah. So they've got to come in and they've got to grow with the organization and within the organization. And yes, for activities, for creating an awareness, for instance, all of us are talking about Facebook.
Yes.
But they want to do it on Instagram and a whole lot of other platforms.
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously they bring a vibrancy. It's not just this year. We've been doing this for the last few years, where we are asking them to take this, take us forward, as Clive Vanberl said. He said they want us to, not lead from the front, but to be behind or beside them.
Okay. So, what would you say is your plan for the future of the community?
No, I don't think I'll be arrogant enough to answer that question. I'll just say that.
But you have a vision. And
my vision is to involve the youth. That's the main vision. My vision is to stand by anybody who needs to be stood by. So youth for education, elderly people who are lonely and or who need some other help, and those who have been affected by the pandemic or some other reason, and they need physical help, as in financial help, etc. So my vision is, and the vision definitely is also our culture. I mean, it's vibrant and it's an evolving culture actually. You know, so it's not exactly the same culture that 30 years ago, and certainly not the culture that we had 60, 70 years ago, when we were sometimes considered more British than the British. So it's an evolving culture. It's an Anglo-Indian culture. Yeah. So my vision is to keep everybody going and keep people united, breaking down barriers of 20, 30 years ago, somebody left or was told to leave the association. Well, if they want to come back and they're okay to bring back, then they're more than welcome.
Wonderful.
Yeah. How long this will last, where's the community going, I think let this decide.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you to describe the initiatives that you've taken to bring not just young people but families from across the length and breadth of the country together on one platform.
Now, this is no credit to me. This is the 148th AGM. It's the All India Anglo-Indian Association. So people have been coming together. I mean, when I was 15, I attended my first AGM. I'm 60 now. So 45 years ago, people were still coming together. I think they're coming in bigger numbers.
Yes.
I think they're, before, children couldn't come or young people were not allowed to participate. So all that is happening now. But no credit to me, because the spread was always there.
But you're referring to the AGM. I'm actually referring to the online platforms that you've set up.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the AGM.
No,
Sorry.
perfectly all right. But beyond the AGM, which is just once a year, you also have young people on social media platforms, meeting on Google Meet, having discussions, and various activities as well.
Correct. So I think any leader in my place would have done it. I mean, you can't be thinking backwards.
I don't think so. I'll have to disagree with you, because there aren't too many leaders who are willing to look at newer ways of doing these things. So in that sense, you are one of the pioneers.
Yeah, but I feel like a dinosaur. So I just feel that either the 60-year-old president-in-chief involves these young people to take that forward, because otherwise it's just going to remain static. Or we get a younger president-in-chief. The problem with getting a younger president-in-chief is he or she must be extremely busy in his career and family, etc. Yeah, but I think it was very clear to me that if I'm dependent on this and doing my work through this, that's the best way to connect everybody through technology, through the social media platforms. And I think this year we have a new National Youth Committee. And I'm just getting a feeling that what you just referred to is going to take off in a very big way on social media. We are there, but it's going to grow tenfold.
I think technology will enable us to build stronger community ties. And how do you think we can motivate our youth to be more involved in the community, as well as in making the contribution of the Anglo-Indian community known to the larger...
Well, the second part is obviously through social media and other platforms.
Correct.
But unless you respect young people, they're not going to want to be with you. So first respect them.
Yes,
I
that's
won't
very
use the word,
important.
yeah, I think it's extremely important. Listen to them and hear them out. Sometimes agree, sometimes disagree. Involve them, engage. I think that's the right word. And that's why their presence is very important at an AGM or any event, And I think that's the first step. And the second step would be that give them some space to decide what they want to do. I think these two things.
All right. So as an educator, I have this one observation to make. So when I was graduating and I went on for higher studies, the rate of dropouts among the community was very high. And today, when they presented the achievements of the young youth team, it was really commendable to see most of them with double degrees, master's degrees, and aspirations to even go on to research and others.
You actually make two issues, so I'm going to talk about them separately. One is dropouts. That's the one end of the spectrum. The number of dropouts, or people not even going to school for too long, was huge in the 50s, 60s, 70s because of various reasons, it's too long to go into. But the focus started becoming from the 80s onwards, education. And I think that's the key, actually. So that's why there was a drift away from jobs where you didn't need to be educated, or sport, or things like that. And then they started being educated, and therefore the dropout rate, the community started taking education far more seriously, and the dropout rate plunged. And it's plunging further. I don't think you have too many dropouts in the community anymore. Having said that, I don't consider a person who stopped studying at 7 or 8 for whatever reason, and then going into some technical training, etc., and making a good life for himself or herself, I don't consider that person a dropout. And coming to the other end of the spectrum, what you're talking about, that has been phenomenal. You had a lot of graduates, etc., finally, or that's it. But now the number of postgraduates and the people going beyond and in professional courses, etc., it's something phenomenal. And it very happily gives people like me a complex, and people of my generation, and we love it. Because everybody's looking at each other. When you're hearing about one person, you say, oh, and then you hear about another.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've written this wonderful book, and I had the pleasure of interviewing you a year ago, The Anglo-Indians, A Portrait of a Community. And, in this, you especially make a note of the contribution of the women of the community. So would you like to comment on that?
Well, I belong to the school of thought, which, there are a lot of people who say that, women are equal to men. That's utter rubbish. Women are not equal to men.
I love it when you say that. I keep hearing you say it, and I'm never tired of it.
That's absolutely far from the truth, William Golding, the Nobel laureate, said what I'm going to say. Actually, I'm just rephrasing or paraphrasing what he said, rephrasing what he said. He said that's rubbish. They are much the stronger, more capable sex or gender. I mean, if you look at it, the only thing we can do, men can do better than women, is we can lift more weights. And the 100 meters record of women will never touch the 100-meter record of men. And by golly, I can't name a third thing, because it's so visible within our community. They're much the stronger sex. They've taken more of the burden or the responsibility, whatever you want to call it. And I've written in my book that the Bharat Ratna should be given to Anglo-Indian women as a group. The reason, and it's a very serious reason, we're in 2023. Go back to, say, 1923. How many women in India of other communities were going out to be nurses, or in the 40s going out to be air stewardesses, or in the 40s and 50s singing songs at restaurants and on stage, or any of the jobs, going to corporate offices, etc. In fact, they were actually frowned upon for the clothes they wore, and how could they because most women of other communities weren't leaving the home, or weren't allowed to leave the home, So there was this whole generation and a half or 2 generations of Anglo-Indian women, maybe starting at the turn of the last century and right up to the 60s, where nobody else stepped out. And then it gradually changed. And today, women of all communities are working in the airlines. Women of all communities are singing, whether it's for the movies or songs on stage. Women of all communities are nurses, etc. So the pioneers have to be recognized, and that's the Anglo-Indian woman. And she did all this, whatever she did, looking after her children and her sometimes troublesome husband and her not so troublesome in-laws sometimes, and the home, and people gossiping and talking about her. And she managed the whole thing. She just went through. And there are so many Anglo-Indian women who didn't even get married because they had to look after or wanted to look after their other siblings or their older parents or even some other relatives. So, all women do this, I think. But in India, the Anglo-Indian woman showed the way. She's the torchbearer, So that's why I think there's a huge credit to the community in the Anglo-Indian women. And I salute them.
Barry, I have a last question for you in this segment of the interview, and that is, what are your thoughts on the position of appointment of MPs and MLAs to represent the community?
Well, I mean, I can have my thoughts, but I can go to sleep with them because there's not much you can do about it. My first problem is the manner in which the government did it. You have to take the stakeholders into play, into talking to them. So you call us for a meeting in January of 2017. Minister calls us, all the bureaucrats, and we have a meeting about 25 Anglo-Indian leaders from all over the country, and we're asked, what are your problems and what are your concerns, etc. Big notes are made, and we have nice, you paid for the lunch, taxpayers, we had a nice lunch, etc. And then they said, okay, they'll get back to us. That's 2017 January. The next time you hear from them, it's December 2019, and they've moved that the Anglo-Indians don't need this representation anymore, and they just go through with it. Quoting something is absolutely ridiculous that there are 296 Anglo-Indians in India. That was the pivot of their argument by the minister in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. So my argument was, then why did your government nominate in 2015, because they were elected in 2014, why did they nominate 2 members of parliament for a community that's only 296? Why did you do that? Because that number is absolutely wrong. There are going to be 500 people, Anglo-Indians, partying today at the delegates' ball. That itself is more than 2, exactly. So that was absolute nonsense. And the other thing is that, of course, I think you called us, so you should have taken us into confidence and explained to us why you're taking it away. And the great reason is you're so few, but actually that was the reason we got the seats. We're spread out. The community has been born only because there's India. Other communities are not born because there's India. Yes. Because when India was formed, when India was when the British colonized and others colonized, and this community evolved, was born from there. So it's a unique community where when they were leaving, they felt that, the community needs some sort of protection because they're not going to have any elected representatives.
That's right.
So that's why they did it. It's nothing to do with us being a backward community, because we are far from a backward community. With people like you and me and heaps of others like you and me, we're not a backward community. Yes, we have our marginalized and people who need help like any other community. So, well, my views are, yes, there were many MLAs and MPs who didn't do much, who didn't do anything, in fact. But there were many who really did a good job. That's not the point. The point is you had to take us into conference, explain to us, A, and B, we still need the representation because we're still very spread out and we will not have representation. We have Mr. Derek O'Brien there as a Rajya Sabha member for the first time. Otherwise, we've all had nominated members.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barry, for having been on this interview. And as we come to the end of the third day, I'm sure all the members are right now relaxing, getting dressed, and ready to attend the delegates' ball, which will which will be the grand finale to the 3-day AGM. Thank you.